Bizarre. Oh, hello, hello. There was some oddness going on there. How is everyone?
Doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I had a meeting with my advisor, Dave Miller, not long ago, and that was interesting and somewhat useful in that order. And then earlier in the week, I had a meeting with Moriel, who runs the Wikipedia Technical Infrastructures Group, which was phenomenally interesting, of course. And they have something that's kind of related to what we do with Visual Meta. Let me see if I can, sorry, so many tabs open, if I can find the relevant bit. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, they're doing really, okay, here we go. I'm gonna paste it in the chat. It's a link to MediaWiki Architecture, Repository Systems, Data Models, Knowledge Store. And what that did was open my mind to, we need a few more fields, but we're not going to go into that, how that's a bit too detailed for this point, I think. But also new use cases. And then I have a question. I think at some point, now that we're looking at doing reference manager type things, can we develop a way that, let's say you are reading a journal article, and on the front page in normal, either text or as a link, you can choose to click to open up the other articles in that journal to have it wrapped as the full edition and that kind of stuff. So the compendium or connection thing is programmatically writable from the author's perspective and clickable from the readers. Is that something we want to investigate?
Can you explain the use case a little bit more?
Yeah, it's like an EDL, edit decision list.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you find a journal article very interesting, download it.
Hello.
Hello. So we're just talking about something that came up kind of in discussions yesterday with Moriel from Wikipedia, and I put a link in the chat to, they have variables such as the language, the document, and things that we haven't really thought about. But for the header of Visual Meta, it seems natural for us to be able to say, for the document type thing, the language, the license of the document, all kinds of stuff, which I'm just mentioning as a by the by because it's very easy to add over time. I don't think it needs a full discussion, but what might need a discussion would be that you download, you come across, you do some research, come across an interesting thing on brain science. So you get that article in your PDF, but that is part of a big issue in a journal. So then on the first page, it says, this is an article from so-and-so journal, click on this thing, link or data or whatever, to open up all the other articles in the same journal in that volume. Like suddenly you kind of produced a book. That becomes kind of a remix thing, because if we can do that really easily for the end user, then, Raphael and Adam, both your systems, you should be able to say, export this one item, but I want the user to be aware of its context and to be able to open it in context if they wish.
The contextual edition is really exciting. Is that the method that most people would want to find related context, as in like seeing the other articles in a journal? That's kind of the primary question that jumps to my head.
Well, the thing is, I don't know to that question. I think there are many different ways you would want to see related stuff. Oh, God, sorry, that's my mother. She doesn't seem to understand this is a regular call. Anyway.
Mom!
Yes. For instance, for our book, let's say you download volume 2. If one of the first pages it says, this is part of a multi-volume work, do you want to load volume 1 and 2 together into one document? So you can then do the view controls for that. That's the kind of stuff. I mean, is that something we should discuss, or do you guys want to jump in other areas? It's just something I've thought about.
I can see the value in that. Just if it's in a related volume, related topics. The piece of like journal, if I open a journal, most of the time there are a variety of topics that are being discussed within that same journal. And they might not all relate to me. So that is the only pushback that I that generates around the journal context.
Brendan, I tend to agree with you there. I'll go ahead, Fred.
No, I was just going to say, it kind of goes back to Vannevar Bush's trails, right? Because the same mechanism can be used for, let's say, Alan is in the mindset of researching a specific thing and either actively or passively turns on a watcher thing. And then when he's done, it feels, okay, I got it. Then he has a trail of everything he's done on the web, let's say, or all the documents he's read. So you can go through really easy and say, that was actually relevant, that was irrelevant, keep the rest, have that as a bundle, as a work that you can share in this way for yourself or others in the future. It's just a way of threading.
Yeah, just first hearing the idea, it sounds to me like one of those ideas that winds up getting more complex the deeper you get into it. So I would if I were putting out a list of features or possible features, I would see if there's lower hanging fruit nearby, because like in the context you talk about, the particular example that you mentioned, it makes sense. But how scalable and how variable is that situation? And then how often does it lead to undesired outcomes? So in the form of, oh, I suddenly downloaded a bunch of garbage, or garbage to me, things I don't want right now, when all I wanted to do is focus on this one thing. And then it brings in the question of how do you actually categorize meaningfully if the journal, in the case of the journal that's talking about, neurology, maybe it all makes sense and it's easy to do, but it seems like it could get pretty cumbersome.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. I think Mark's hand is still up, even though he's getting tired. I'm going to halfway down. Yes, Mark.
It's bouncing up and down. And it's well, actually, in part, Alan's actually neatly articulated one of the things I thought. I also sense it's actually perhaps slightly early days to see the best of this with what we're doing. So I totally get the idea, but I know some of the history and thinking behind it. But I'm not sure if sort of the bits are there. But I also thought doing this, having just demonstrated microcosm from, where are we talking about, 1993, that was one of the things you could do, because systems then tended to record your history, where you've been through what then was a closed system. And you could save that, and you could make that effectively into a trail, and you could make that into a tutored thing. So you could follow, you could step down the path, and you could branch off anywhere you went, or you could just click the next button and put you back on the trail. So I'm totally with the idea of EDLs. I think the problem, actually, fun enough, is context. The easy part to say is get me all the things. The hard part is saying get me all the relevant things, because half the problem is that our relevance, the relevance is mainly stuck in here. And this is why I say it may be early days, because to really show this off, you'd need to make quite a nice, rich data set seeded with affordances that could allow you to show, effectively, you need to put in the actual decided keywords, not the keywords you got by scraping out of some machine system or something, but deliberately thought markers where you could go and say, right, yeah, these things all relate.
Yeah, so the thing is that the use case that I want is in Reader, we have Command F in the way that I think all of you have seen. Just briefly, you select the word chocolate, do Command F. It shows you only the lines in the document that has the word chocolate with 2 lines gray above and below, right? So I could imagine, for instance, today I've been working on kind of an introduction to my thesis, and I talked about a bit of brain evolution stuff. And that is, of course, a field where things are changing. So I would really like to be able to just download all the relevant PDFs in one volume, one artificial volume. So I can do the Command F and equivalent things to see how that research has changed. So I could then quickly say, as we thought then, but we think now, or we were wrong and it was shown up now. Similarly, of course, with the future of textbook, you highlight the word Xerox. It really bugs me that we have a timeline in book 1, we're going to have a timeline in book 2, but obviously the one in book 2 is updated. So I would really like to be able to say, show me something that is volume 1, 2, and timeline, but without the timeline from the first. And that URL or string or description I can give to people as an option for how to read the volume. Hi, Peter.
Hello.
Did you see the video from last week? Did you see that we agreed with you?
Very good.
Good. Anyway, this whole multi-wrapper thing, I'm sure will bounce around, but I'm wondering what other topics people have for today in terms of especially making something.
Well, I've just got one I put in the sidebar, really, for Raphael. It's partly a passing thing that swum through my Twitter feed by sheer chance, but it just made me think of your app and this idea of sort of cards. And this is somewhere they have photos in a photo album. You click on the back, and in fact, it's all structured data behind it. So this is a passing similarity, but I thought it might just be interesting to see for those interested in that sort of thing. Interesting.
Could you repaste that?
This is a great reference. I'm taking a look at it right now.
That's quite cool, actually. The whole clicky thing is interesting.
Yeah, and it was, I was, this shows, don't weed too aggressively. This is someone I used to sort of follow in Twitter back when I was doing photo metadata, gosh, in the dark ages. And just occasionally something really interesting comes out, and that was, out of that feed. Peter, I've put the stuff, repaste it in the chat. Does it show for you?
Yep,
Yeah, Image Snippets is really cool. She does a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah, and this is only for images, though.
Oh, sure. It's not the reason I'm showing it is the nice sort of, in a sense, coming to get convergent evolution of someone using again a sort of Nate card motif, and also the linkage here to structured. Well, there's data triples. Is what they're doing. And it's just one of those things that has no particular import, but it's just nice to see something happening.
Of course.
And maybe it sparks an idea.
Frode, to your earlier point, it reminds me of something. It may connect or not, but I'll share it. It reminded me a little bit of this idea I mention every so often, very old idea, but I called them quantum links, and they were meant to be improvements to hyperlinks. In the sense that they wouldn't have to be, like, here's the link to anchor to a specific article, which has all sorts of problems as we've experienced. One of the features of a quantum link would be you could define whether you almost defined its boundaries rather than its termination point. So boundaries could be defined, or attributes could be like, I want the most up-to-date, which would be pertinent if you were talking about the stock market. And you see that in articles these days where you can have an article that's 2 years old, but it'll have this week's ticker embedded in the article. But it could also be like, give me the latest on the intersection of X and Y minus Z. So I'm bringing that up because it could be interesting, not so much as a button like download all the articles that relate to this, but as a more atomic feature, maybe in a future PDF version where you could say, here's a link, but I don't want to define the place on the web where it lives. I want it to have these attributes and find the best match, or find a school, a bundle of the best matches. And that doesn't mean automatically download. Maybe it means you go to a different place or modal and, kind of sort through what you want.
I think this is very, very, very important. Doug had some ideas around this where you could say, go to this directory and scroll down until you find something that matches, let's say at the beginning of a word, and then copy that back. That was one. Excuse me. So that's a way that you could always have the correct entry in your contact books. You could go to some central server and very simple do that. But I mean, the bigger thing here, what we are talking about is obviously very related to AI in the general sense of speaking to a system, because speaking and typing is same difference in this sense, right? You know, go and find me this and then this, and the criteria is this, right? So in order to give people, end users, an actual usable interaction for this is probably insanely important for the finding and then also for the structuring and presenting it, right?
Have you guys seen this website called Schema.org? I think it's going to be quite useful for visual meta.
Yeah, I talked about that with Moriel this week. Moriel from Wikipedia, which may join us today or Monday, or depending on when she has time. Yeah, the whole, you're calling it a quantum link. I would kind of ignore the link part of that, maybe, Alan, and think, and considering what's on your computer and what's on the internet is kind of indistinguishable in terms of interaction and use. Maybe we're basically talking about kind of view criteria, or maybe we need to find an entirely new term for it, because we're just saying, I need to see this.
Go, yeah, Mark, you got.
I think I'm realizing I really probably need to do a demo of microcosm for you at some point, or if the film from the Human 21 workshop comes out. It's fascinating having been asked to demonstrate that. I had to sort of dive in a bit deeper, and I really began to realize just how rich it was in the sense of it almost had a link stack. So you could have all these different sorts of links, and in fact, you could prioritize them. So when you selected this or you search for this thing, you maybe got a different type of effectively reaction from the system in terms of what it thought you were asking for. So interestingly enough, even working without the wide affordances of the web, there's probably some good stuff to go back and mine if you look at some of the microcosm papers. But as I said, you can, if you're sufficiently interested and want to run VirtualBox and install a copy of Windows XP on it, you can even play with microcosm yourself, unencumbered by any further restrictions. But it is just interesting how we're reaching back these ideas, in a sense, refreshing, not completely new. They've been thought at a time when the sort of ways of affecting them were far less competent than they are now. But it seems to be, we keep going back to the fact, the problem is you want to do search, we can sort of do that. Our problem is defining relevance.
Yeah, and agreed. And Fred, something you mentioned earlier, I wasn't super clear on, but if you're talking about, when you were mentioning the quantum view, were you referring to pulling from things within your own, either internal wiki or your own system versus as opposed to the entire web? Because that goes back to the same search problem, right? Like, where do you bound? Where do you find a boundary there? So which one were you referring to?
I don't know. I think that's a very important issue, but then in some sense it shouldn't be an issue. Of course it is. But I mean, like this morning, I was writing a kind of a preface to my thesis that I sent to Mark with several errors, which he found, thank you. And a lot of it is things that I think I know, that I just quickly did a search, find a citation, copy the DOI, pasted it in, that kind of stuff. There was actually one example where my citation said the opposite of what I thought. So I was proved wrong and I had to change what I was writing, which is good. So that does happen. But okay, I think it's very relevant to this. I'll just try to explain what this thing is. It's called As We May Connect. So the idea is that many people complain that more digital young people are very shallow. There's a book called The Shallows by Nicholas Carr, well known. because, you know, we have the ability to kind of hop in and out of things. It's not just TikTok. It's how we do our research. That's how I did my research this morning. I know that stuff. I just needed to find some citations online, search Google Scholar, boom, there it was. Quick, quick, quick. Dave Millard on this topic said today, don't confuse speed with superficiality, right? Which I think is pretty central. So the point is that the potential for speed and access interaction in digital is, of course, massive. But people who are not digital, I wouldn't say digital native, that's an iffy term I've come to learn. But people who aren't really embracing what can we do in here are not really developing the kind of tools that can support that. You know, when we, over evolutionary history, went into different environments, physical environments, we had to adapt. You know, that's well known, all the stages of that. And my kind of breakthrough in my own mind yesterday was plants, the roots, they go in and they connect to other plants. They kind of communicate in there. And how they communicate obviously depends on the kind of soil, how far away they are from other plants. So the actual structures of this, just like visualizing these tangles, will be different from someone who is at, let's say, as I love to say, Alexander Hamilton's time, writing the Federalist Papers. The actual abilities for them to reach out, make something, has a different speed, a different tempo, a different medium. So that means that in their brains, which has to map onto this information world, is very different from someone who's trying to write a paper with a web, right? It's more fast and bitty. Sure it is, but it doesn't mean that we have to be idiots today, right? We just have to develop tools that really accept, okay, same as when we left the trees and went into the savannah and started walking upright. You know, now we've left the parchment and we're dealing digitally. If we don't really embrace this medium and really accept what it is, then we're not going to be able to properly thrive, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm talking about here is, and I see your hand, Peter, so just 1 second, but like the whole notion of a bound document is, of course, we all agree, insane, right? What is a bound document? It is an editorial decision. And we need to provide other editorial decisions to make that book bigger or smaller, combine it or not combine it. You know, we're not going to have somebody submit a thesis based on tweets. I don't think we're going to go that atomic and that bang, bang, bang TikTok. I'm not saying that. But we're also not going to have people do huge, long documents, except for very few people who are of that mindset. If we are to open thinking, oh God, let me just read the paragraph. There's a beautiful, right. So this is what Hamilton wrote in the very beginning of the first Federalist Papers, which was defending the US Constitution, right? It has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country by their conduct and example to decide the important question whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. Very easily to reword that and forget this country and say this period in time, but it comes down to, can we build our societies from reflection and choice? It's an absolutely wonderful thing. I mean, this is why I cry every time I see Hamilton. These are the ideas behind it. And we're doing exactly the same thing. We're not fighting off the British. We're fighting off the legacy of analog stuff and trying to see if we can develop a strong society within digital. And to do that, we can't be ease of use, and also we can't be, everybody has to be a programmer. It's really complicated. And the kind of dialogue we have in this group, I think often addresses that. And I think that's really wonderful. Peter.
Yes, I was wondering, does anyone have any video of the original note card system in use?
That would be.
Because I've never seen it working. I've read little snippets about it. They've had me drooling. And if I could just see a demo of it working, and I was wondering whether anybody had access to it or could mount it or has a link.
Very quick. I think not. I know from a past project when I was down in Southampton, we tried recovering it. I know that the person who owns the rights to it is dead, and his wife doesn't want to open the attic, which I respect. So unless somebody has a copy of note cards, that hasn't surfaced yet, I'm afraid I think it's lost to.
Who is it from?
Note cards.
No, but the note card system, is that a book? Is it like something like
Oh, sorry, no,
Zettelkasten?
it's Palo Alto, Xerox at Palo Alto. It was the system they had. It was a windowed system. It also had the earliest of the sort of map cards that had spatial relationship between different nodes on the system. Yeah, interesting. And it sort of fed into Aquanet, and which then fed into sort of Wiki and VKB on the spatial side. But it also had quite an effect on a number of other systems.
Okay.
But sadly, Peter, I don't think anyone had the presence of mind to take any video of it.
Like a manual of it, any kind of good solid documentation.
There's
Even
a
if
lot of
they have no
videos
video
for
of it.
HyperCard, but this one I haven't heard yet.
Yeah, no, it's
Okay, I'll put a link in
Sorry.
for you. Sorry, I
It was
jumped
written
on
in
that.
Interlisp D.
Alan. I see you have a yellowed cartoon hand.
Or do I? Yes. Well, to your earlier point, which is a great point, it seems that, and maybe I've misunderstood, but when talking about the struggles of analog to digital, to me it seems the essential bottleneck is our dependency on words, and
I may have to disconnect you. Hang on.
what's that?
I may have to disconnect you right now.
Oh yeah, right. I know this is apocryphal or sacrilegious. But yeah, the idea that our instinct is to solve these problems by getting deeper, more atomic, more granular into words themselves. And the problem that I always have from just like decades of teaching myself is that I don't know the word to look for, or the insight comes from stumbling onto something that didn't involve any of the words or way of thinking that I was previously thinking. I've been reading Mind in Motion by Barbara Tversky since she showed up the other week, and it's really fantastic. And it's a nice counterpoint to that instinct. I think that digital instinct that says all the information is there, and we can assume that all the right words have been used, and all we need to do is find those documents and those insights that are miles deep, and problem solved. But I think that's what we've been doing for 30, 60 years. And maybe AI, but maybe just a different way of looking at the problem could loosen that up. Like topic for another time, but I love to explore the idea of categorizing what you find, or to very quick, almost emotional associations, almost non sequiturs. I read an article that reminds me of plant and bear, right? And that's a nonsense thing to do if the article is about like, neurology. You put it in like brain and academia white paper. But anyway, that's another topic. Anyway, does any of that resonate?
I think it resonates with
does,
Adam's work on kind of a multi-dimensional workspace very much, doesn't it? Adam, because you're all about. Sorry, and Raphael, yes, please.
Yeah, no, always when the conversation touches the point, the topic of either language or communication, it always gains, for me, it gains huge complexity, because if you think about organizing information, you're going to think about organizing information based on the language and culture that you bring forward. So if you go, for example, if somebody from England goes to a colony of native Indians, then the person from England will analyze that colony based on the things that they already know. But if they don't have a differentiation for either gender or right or wrong or how things broke, you're never going to be able to understand, because you have that cultural background to interpret what you're seeing. So there's a lot of languages that say, for example, if I break a cup, the blame is on me for having, dropped the cup. But in a lot of other languages, if a cup is broken, the cup broke. It's like the cup as an object, as an entity, broke itself because of circumstances. So there's a lot of different things related to that. And if we think that text solves everything, I don't think it does, because specifically of that, language has been constructed on different contexts. And I don't know, it's just a small rant that we can never judge something with one specific point of view, and I don't think one language or one structure solves it. And it's a freaking impossible problem to solve, because how would you contemplate all the languages, all the points of views, all the contexts? It's mad.
It is an impossible problem. It reminds me, I just heard this yesterday. My niece did this. To your point, she threw something on the floor, and her mom was like, "Don't throw that on the floor." And my niece said, "I didn't throw it on the floor. I gave it to the floor."
I'm glad we're having this kind of not diversion but elevation of the discussion. Even Bertrand Russell, in his book on knowledge, and going through pages and pages, at the very end, he says human knowledge is messy. There's no way around it. So we have to acknowledge that. And the great thing about text is it makes things quite concrete, which is part of the journey, but it's not the whole journey. And of course, there's the problem that if it's written down, it becomes authoritative because of the author. That's not the origin of that terminology. However, we feel that, right? Where did you learn that? You saw it on the internet. Well, I read it in a book. Boom, I win the argument, right? That's not brilliant. So, I think we definitely need to move far beyond that. I mean, the reason I've been pushing on visual meta, so we can do that. I don't want to stay in text land. I don't want to stay in paragraphs of gray text. I want to be able to do the Adam style of putting things around, that those things are not dead pieces of JPEG, that they have some connection and intelligence. Different colored hand from Mark Anderson.
Yep, I'm going for sort of pale fleshy pig this week. Yes, I was prompted by your last thing, and you mentioning Adam, because one thing that sort of came up, I think, in a conversation you or I had, was I was just wondering, for Adam, the current data set that your demos use has everything that has at least one link, because at the time we were looking at citation links. I can extend that to the whole data set, which is about another 20% of items, because if you want to start at looking at some other factors, it might be useful to see things as part of the whole. So indeed, whether something has, I could put in a special marker that, for instance, would allow you to just sort of ease out everything, basically to pre-compute for you everything that has at least one in or outbound link. But one of the things that I recall was this idea of, for, well, whatever attribute across the system, some kind of a heat map. So stepping back from the citational link, that very deliberate link of just sort of saying, I don't know, where does this keyword turn up more, or where does, I mean, it's sad. I mean, it was a ton of work I don't have, but for instance, sort of say, well, where are the people who are writing the papers coming from, or what are the organizations that are contributing or something? We're sort of close. It's about 4,000 authors. I could have a crack at putting some organizational data on that. It's probably not impossible to do, because I've got all the documents. But anyway, I just wondered if I gave you a wider, richer set, is that something that we could have another bit more fun with in visualization terms?
Oh, yes. I'd love playing with that.
Okay.
For instance, it might be nice to say all of the authors of the paper who've read something, whether they cited it in that immediate paper or in anything else they'd ever written.
Oh, that probably goes a bit beyond my, well, in theory, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? In the system, in the world we're sort of positing, this sort of thing ought to be possible. At the moment, I mean, I think what I'm learning from the making of the data sets, it just shows how poor our data is. We assume it's richer because we put the sort of underpants named bit of internet search in there, but actually internet search is woefully poor, except in certain special areas or things that have very, very particular terms. And actually a lot of our search is annoyingly not that easily sort of separated from the general noise. But I agree with you, Peter, it'd be lovely to do.
Yeah, I've noticed that Google search results are much, much better and more useful if I'm searching for programming libraries and software related issues. And if I start going out into the wider world, the results get worse and worse and worse.
Mm.
Yeah,
and I hasten to add for future listeners, I'm not trying to rubbish all the effort that's gone into the wonderful forms we have of search on the web. I just think that sometimes we're a bit self-delusional about just how accurate it is or how complete it is. That's just that's just work yet to be done. It doesn't mean that what we have at the moment has been badly done. What's been done at the moment has been done with a lot of hard work. I just think there's a lot more work to be done to get to where we think we are at the moment.
so when it comes to the kind of ground level of data and interactions, we have kind of decided to at least talk about showing some kind of reference manager thing for the 9th of December, right? That seems to be an interest. So I think we need to, I'm not a big fan of Markov's book there. Anyway.
It's just stuff. If you don't know the era.
Yeah, but yeah, so it would be really, really good if we, in these conversations to go all over the place is fantastic. And Barbara just emailed wondering when we're having chats. She would like to come back, which is a huge compliment to us, I think. But also, what do we want to build? Because it can so easily get very, very abstract, right? Do we want to build a way to do a library for one single, excuse me, series of conference papers? That may in itself be extremely useful, especially if it can be expanded into the other libraries. Or do we want to support an individual user who gets their documents from anywhere? Or do we want to focus on visualizations or connections? What is the interest in the group here for this?
It's an excellent question. Yeah, got hands up. I'll wait.
No, you were first before those pinky hands came up.
Well, yeah, I can. I'll say one thing that makes this so gnarly is the kind of user is so widespread. And so, for instance, take Reader versus liquid text. Reader is a very minimal environment that allows me to, consume one thing at a time and really sit with it. By contrast, liquid text is a beautiful app, and you can do so much with it. And you can, combine and recombine. If you haven't tried it out, got to try it out. But even though I love it intellectually, it becomes too much of a mess. And so I never actually wind up using it because I have all this dread associated with it. But for another kind of user, for a more academic user than me, it might be the perfect home.
I think we're focused on the law market for exactly that reason. It can be very, very rich and powerful, but it can get messy if you don't have a specific angle in mind.
Yeah, so the open-ended versus closed-ended, getting an idea of the right kind of user, or not the right kind of user, but maybe the early on user would be really important. I have an idea of that, but I don't know that it fits the rest of the group, right? Like it's more of my long-term goal for early learners. But this product may be more for people that are already deeply invested in the domain and just need to, pull out the tidbits more. That's it.
Peter.
Yeah, I would like to have, first of all, anything I want, I'd want it to be cross-platform. So ideally, it could be built on a web technology stack instead of being dependent on an Apple stack. I really despise Apple as a company. I mean, I love all the cool affordances that they give us and the neat stuff that you're able to do right out of the box because of their APIs. But they want to be a roach motel for your data. And I'm scared that the company is going to get to a point where I'm not going to be able to do business with them. They're going to lock down the Macintosh, so I won't be able to run software that I want to run. And they'll try to turn the notebooks into iPads, and they'll dumb the interface down, and I'll be forced. No, it won't be right away, but maybe in 5-10 years, the writing's on the wall. It'll get to a point where if you want to do serious computing, you're going to have to find a home other than Apple. So it'll take some time, but we want to try to extricate ourselves from being tied in to their ecosystem. At least that'd be my advice. By the same token, I wish I had a cross-platform alternative to Devon Think. It's an everything box. I have everything in it, but I'm incredibly frustrated by it. I just discovered that for the past 2 months, I've been tagging and importing web pages into it. And lo and behold, instead of having them come in as web archives, which is what I selected from the little how do you want to save this item drop-down menu, it brought them all as bookmarks, and it threw away the tags that I'd been painstakingly adding. So I suddenly realized that all I have are dozens of bookmarks, which I could have gotten with URL Manager Pro instead of using Devon Think. And I have to go in, literally, you can't script this. It's so frustrating. There's a widget in their user interface that you can manually click that will turn the bookmarks back into web archives, but there's no way to script it automatically because the convert script does nothing but create another copy of the bookmark. Because I ran a book, I figured, oh, great. Well, I'll use the convert script. And lo and behold, all it did was give me more duplicates of the bookmarks. Then I read a little blurb on their website saying, well, you can use the smart folder action things. So I can create a smart rule. So next, I create a smart rule to go in, find all of the bookmarks, and run the smart rule conversion to turn them into web archives.
Okay, Peter, we don't need the details. We don't need the details of your pain. The pain is evident.
Okay, there's a lot of pain.
Yeah.
But basically, we'd like to have a tool that, in addition to the citation, could stash away the current copy of any resources that are referenced on a web page so that you can see the page as it was when you looked at it down the road and run indexing and other fun stuff on it. But ideally, it should be open. You should be able to have plugins that someone else could write so that we could share a core framework, and then each of us could go and make little tools that could integrate into that to extend it in different directions. So it'd be more open-ended, something closer to Photoshop plugins from Adobe than what we have now. Because I'm just really, really sick of having my whole life dependent on third-party companies that always wind up shafting me. For instance, I had a ton of notes in Circus Pony's notebook, but they had this horrible proprietary licensing scheme and all, and the program went away. And a beautiful UI, it was really nice if you like the skeuomorphic look of having real notebooks to play with, and had really good indexing and a nice user interface for it. Well worth looking at any graphics you can find just for ideas as to how a GUI might look. But again, they were so worried about their business model that they wound up fundamentally killing the long-term viability of the software. And it seems to be happening over and over again. So anything we do, we should try to invest in something that's going to be cross-platform that isn't trapped in anybody's roach motel. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now.
I think we agree with the sentiments, and I'm sure. Okay, Mark, quickly. Adam's got his hand up.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know others. Actually, just to reflect on something Peter said, the way I think of that is not so much necessarily strictly in the software sense, but just thinking the design patterns. Are these design patterns that are inherently rooted in a particular ecosystem? If they're not, we don't necessarily have to build everything for every type, but that's where I see the lock-in more than necessarily getting to the stage of building something. What made me put my hand up was actually just reflecting on something Alan said, which was, I'm talking about different types of users and the fact that actually you have something like, I can't remember which one you mentioned, but you collect stuff. And so I think one of the things actually we want to work on is breaking the cult of collection. It's this idea that if I collect enough stuff, that's what my task is, to collect all the stuffs. And once I have all the stuffs, it's the computer's job to give me the answer 42 or whatever. I think that's a fundamentally sort of balked approach to life. And so one of the things we sort of want to gently encourage is the fact that, no, you, the human, have a hand in this. It's not just a matter of dumping everything you can find in the hopper and cranking the handle on the side, which is an infantilism which is rampant in a lot of application design at the moment. And then I'll shut up and let Adam speak.
It's a problem being quiet for half an hour or 45 minutes and then trying so many things here. What I find especially frustrating is that all other you call it disciplines, or maybe the other professions than text writers get so fantastic computer tools. We have Photoshop and video editors and fantastic 3D graphics programs, and there are so many great tools, and we have good hardware for them as well. You have 3D mice, you have pen, pixel perfect pen input, and we as text writer have something very, very close to a typewriter with the copy paste. It's total insanity to me that we still treat it as a thing that is entered just character by character, that language is the only thing, that you only get bold and line breaks as formatting options, and if you're not happy with that, you have to either escape to some sort of desktop publishing system, some InDesign or high-end software for actually making books, or you have to escape into kind of PowerPoint slide software or photo editor. It's total insanity. We need graphical text. Text should be, it is graphical. Text is so graphical, but we don't treat it as graphical. We have close to zero agency when it comes to the graphical side to text, unless you really jump ship and go to the limited text tools we have in PowerPoint. Why on earth do I have to go to PowerPoint to think?
Hey,
there I get my page. There I can put things, different media into, but it's a very, very limited and stupid system as well. It's collected, you can send it, so it has many of the properties, but it's not a text tool. It's not a text is a third-class citizen in a slide software.
Oh, fully
we really need.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, but you're guilty as well, Frode, because
I know.
you separate. I don't have any graphical agency in author. I've just got language and page and enter.
You have the map.
So that is why. But for the actual text, it's a text I want to move around. I don't. If that was the main view, I would be happy.
Well, Alan,
if you converted it.
No, in agreeing with Adam, just a little bit defensively, in the very first version of Author, which was actually iPad, you could take any text and drag it off to the margins anywhere and then recombine it. You can actually kind of do that now, but it turns out to be not that useful. So I agree with the questions you're raising. I agree with the priorities. I have not solved them at all. But I'm just, at some point it's fun to discuss back and forth what we're actually doing about it. But anyway, Alan, and then I have a movie reference for you guys.
Definitely agree, Adam. In fact, I have a theory about text and why it's such a poorly treated. It's almost in computing terms, it's almost like the eye of the storm. It is where everything came from, programming and writing. And so it's wild that if you put on a certain kind of filter, it's changed the least of all of the, if software is eating the world and it's disrupting industry to industry to industry, the text itself has changed only very slightly. And I would include that I would include Twitter as being an evolution or of conversation, but and programming languages, but it's wild that it hasn't changed nearly as much. It's wild that we still write articles when the modalities and the affordances that we have would imagine something entirely different. Probably Asimov and others did. Anyway, that's the broad reflection.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree on this. I think one of the surprises, on iOS in a message, you can do the tap back, do a thumbs up or exclamation. It's such a change of how we communicate. Often I feel a bit stupid if I write okay. The little icon is better. That's an actual evolution of how we deal with text. But movie reference. So there is going to be a new Matrix movie coming out in a few months. Have you seen the trailer? Okay, in the very end of the trailer, we're introduced to a new persona who's actually played by the same actor who played the King in Hamilton. Wow, what a crossover, okay?
It's gonna be great.
He's in Mindhunters, and he's fantastic, by the
Yes,
way.
yeah, exactly. That's where we came, and it's just so opposite. But let's just have
I
fun.
didn't enjoy the trailer.
Yeah, the trailer was very medium. Like the first shot looks very CG, but it isn't. But anyway, so if we accept all these issues, but let's say crying out loud, all these messages. Sorry, guys. Let's think about the Matrix. Let's pretend that the entire world is the Matrix, and we have the imagination, right? The cheapest solution is to have AR glasses and put text and images and graphs all over the place, because that's almost like a sellout, I think, because foveal vision isn't that big. So if you really need a concentration space, yes, of course, it'll be useful at some point to use everywhere. No question about that. But what can we actually do to make it more text, more visual, as Adam said?
So in the context of, sorry, Adam, in the context of the Matrix, I don't think we're gonna have kind of that dashboard view. I think it's just gonna be inside of us. And we're going to use our mind to have that spatial. It's going to be more sci-fi related instead of just, I'm not sure. It's just going into the sci-fi world. I think it's going to be within us and not outside of us.
I can say very quickly, that's one of the downsides of virtual reality being owned by gaming, is that it's always been very Euclidean in physical space. And I've always wanted to see what a lo-fi VR would look like, not trying to simulate the world around us, but actually make concepts Euclidean or non-Euclidean. And I think that would be part of it, is that it's not going to be so much like Minority Report views and screens, as much as like, here's an idea and it may be a galaxy away from this other idea, but because I can operate in non-Euclidean sort of hyperspace, it's right next to these two totally random ideas are actually right next to each other. And being able to navigate that, I mean, it'll still take, we'll have to almost like get used to 4-dimensional thinking. But I mean, that still doesn't answer your question. It's just something interesting.
Just as on top of that, before you, Peter, I mean, do you guys know my tool Liquid? Right, you can select any text in any application, keyboard shortcut, boom, there you are, right? That has 300 different commands, and it takes less than half a second to execute. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that because of the 4 dimensions. I've given you 300 dimensions for each piece of text on anywhere you are. So, you come across something that sparks your imagination, boom, you can do that with it. I think we need to do something like that, but professional and big and massive. This is almost a hack. So in terms of the dimensions, yes, some of them will be visual, and like in Interstellar, you have all these weird lines and all that, sure. But also in terms of interaction, to give people the richest freedom of following their spark, their intuition, their imagination, their hunches. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I think it won't even necessarily be visual. It could be more auditory. I could see the little voice, instead of saying low battery all the time, saying, that's Raphael. It's his wife's birthday next week, and his daughter just got accepted into Brown, or something like that. Just a little voice in the ear that could be picking up on what's being said in the conversation, and you could have told it ahead of time what things you'd be interested in, so it would know when to interrupt.
Raphael,
Intelligence is certainly part of it, yeah.
Raphael just insulted us massively here. No interface needed. Yeah.
The interface is the connection in the back of your brain.
It's still an interface, but we really need to get down to some kind of brass tacks, guys, of who are we trying to augment and why, to do what. I think, I mean, look at what Adam has built for us based on Mark's database. It's amazing. You know, if we put some brain together, if Adam wants to do more along those lines, we can do some really impressive stuff.
Because I was sort of thinking, the reason I was listening to Alan, but in saying, you know, thinking do stuff in sort of 3 dimensions or n dimensions, because I don't think we've even properly tapped out 2-dimensional space in terms of the sort of spatial hypertext concept. And I sometimes, yeah, we can do it in ND, but does it make it, apart from the Euclidean space bit, which I get, but I mean, does it make it any easier? Because how many of us are actually quite good at thinking? Yes, we consume a 3D picture or 3D world around us. That doesn't necessarily, you know, you talk to someone who's trying to put up flat pack furniture, we soon find that people aren't very good at thinking in 3D. So actually, there are some much lower hanging fruits. And so, you know, it's really useful to see the concept map in Author. I think of sort of the maps I'm used to using, Tinderbox. I think of the things that Adam's doing, and I think we can get a lot of mileage out of that, because I think part of it is just getting people to raise their eyes above the page and realize there are other ways of interacting with what they've already got, even before we get to the sunny uplands beyond, which, you know, is a much bigger needle to shift.
Comment on that, but wait in line.
Adam.
I will take it. I lost my.
Okay. Well, no, I definitely agree that there's more to explore in 2D space, but I'll frame it differently. I think infographics are very harmful, and they are an exploration of 2D space, but because they are bound in 2D and trying to be explainable, what they wind up doing is forcing, I think they go against their intention, and they focus on a point and remove the context. And if you deal with something in 3D in a physical space, let's not talk about VR, by moving something around, you understand it more. You understand its weight and its, you know, width and depth, and how slick it is. That kind of contextual knowledge is what I want to see in a distributed non-local sense, where I can learn about, you know, say like vaccines in the US, and the pros and cons of this. And rather than reading an article that's just going to elicit an emotion from me, I can explore it myself. That I think can be done more. I think there's more opportunity there in 3D, I hate to say it, than in 2D. I still think it can be done in 2D because animation adds so much more life to an idea. But yeah, but that's where I'm coming from.
Adam, are you ready? Oh,
you're muted.
ready and muted. Great combo. Yes.
Yeah, regarding I started the last thing. Regarding animation, I think animation is usually frowned upon by many people, but someone said that animation is a body language of user interfaces, and I think that is a very good way of looking at it. You see where things are coming from, where they are going, and so it's very, very useful to think about animation in that sense. So I think text could have animation to show where it came from and where it went, and especially on screens. Screens are so temporal in their nature. Text can appear and disappear immediately. So we need to have more body language of the interface, so we actually see where it came from and where it goes, the text, and where you are as well. So so that is something. That is why I don't really like the instantly changing views. We need more clues for text. But underlying everything here is that I don't think we have, and I agree with Mark here that even 2-dimension is really not nailed down yet, and we can do much more with 2 dimensions, just having more, finding the actual fabric or the things you project upon. What is that? what is that kind of coordinate system? What is that space? And it usually, whenever you work with it, it immediately turns into 3D because things are stacked on top of each other. You want some nice drop shadows, and everything is, that is of course a reflection. It is a simulation of 3 dimensions. So a kind of a flat 3D.
2.5D, they call it in gaming. Yeah, 2.5.
Yeah. So at least that we need to have some sort of stacking. So that is
But we're
actually fabric is what we need.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We're 1 minute over our official time, so I have to ask again, what are we augmenting? I'll give you guys some suggestions, see what sticks. Are we helping someone read a single document? Are we helping someone author a single document? Are we helping someone see connections between documents? Are we helping someone organize their concepts or their knowledge? Are we helping someone collaborate? Are we helping someone understand an aspect of science, which may very well be inherently 3D? Are we helping someone have a presence somewhere? Are we helping someone understand someone else's emotional perspective? We can't solve all of this. It's almost like saying we're going to write a book together. It's going to have words in it, and we're discussing the margins, right? If we don't decide on the thing we're going to augment, this will still be a great forum, and I absolutely love the crazy stuff that comes up. But it would be nice if we settle on kind of a fun project together.
Well, I thought we did, because we seem to have this conversation at everything, and we say something, and then we have the same conversation. So maybe what we need to do is to go revisit previous weeks and see what we actually said at the end, because I have a suspicion that we sort of keep coming back to roughly the same place.
We want to, yeah, but there is, Alan, I see you have your hand up, but there was something, I can't remember who said it in this group. Someone said, the thing that seems to be missing in software is handling all the little bits. Not just like a book library, a reference manager, but your notes and all of that. I really think that is the thing we can do. You know, there's
about the third thing. Sorry, about the third thing you mentioned, which was sort of connections, is to me, I think, the exploitable space, because I think it goes back to what Adam's just said about what we can do even now in 2D space. What Alan was sort of saying about, no, it flashed from my mind. there was a cogent comment in there somewhere, but so I think that's also quite good, because it's also taking a definitely different path to then being just a slightly better maker of text or something, which isn't, which I hasten to add is not a sideswipe at author at all, which is doing really interesting things, not least the sort of concept map, but this thing of drawing connections, because it's something that is quite different to what we've had before. And it also steps, but I know what the problem like Alan mentioned was, like, you know, infographics are wonderful, but in a way that's where information goes to die. Once you've set it in concrete, it's wonderful, but it's completely ruined.
It doesn't have to be concrete to be an infographic. It can be very...
No. An infographic is normally considered static, or my understanding is, whereas you can have a dynamic visualization. The problem there is the tools are frightfully mature for that, because you suddenly realize why an infographic works is because you've nailed down all the loose bits and you've elided the unnecessary data. So you get a very concentrated object, which you can consume quite easily, but you don't get to do all the tinkering with the little bits. And in that sense, the tools, I think, are still yet to be made. But indeed, as Adam's rather said, you know, where are the tools for doing these things?
But I mean, if we take Adam's work so far as a basis for where we're going, and then we all just think, and it's nice, it's a thing. I see you shaking your head there, Adam. And then we say, okay, what if we put on top X, whatever we're personally interested in? Because being able to do it in this way, and these, you know, columns changing it, because Mark's right, if it's just a specific visualization, that is a specific thing, infographic. But if we can, let's say for me, I would love to be able to put notes in there as separate objects, right? And maybe not have it there, you know. If we start thinking along those lines, we can start having arguments over specific concepts, right?
Yeah.
Because
Well, that's what Weblo was sort of doing, wasn't it? You know, you could take something, you could attach notes to it, but they're all a form of spatial hypertext in a way. One of the interesting things that we haven't sort of looked at is, I know this came up in discussion in the previous week, was starting with something, say, like the nice visualization Adam made the first one with, you know, which is the citation links, is be able to say, okay, you know, in my Minority Report sense, I want to take that skein of stuff, and then I want to go and I want to decompose it over here. Hand gestures not needed, but it's these sorts of exploration parts that are, I think, very much missing and could unlock a lot more. They they inherently rest on better metadata, at which we're cruelly ill-served, because the level of our understanding at the moment is going out and collecting all the things, and collecting all the things is not creating metadata, it's creating noise.
No, absolutely. But guys, we still have to decide on who we're augmenting. I would say we're augmenting a student, but that could be a non-professional student. It could be anybody. But can we discuss that for a minute to see what the general feeling of our target user is? Because it can't be everybody.
Yeah, I think student is, I'm all for that.
Yeah, and based on the people in this group, it seems the correct target audience.
Well, it also is people who's.
But who is this magical student first? I don't get it. Is it still the graduate student thing, or is it a high school student, or what kind of student, or is it the person who studies something? Is it still us?
This is to be
decided.
I suggest probably not the sort of postgraduate student. Something low down, because in a sense, you want someone who's actively engaged in study, not just doing homework they've been sent home with. So you want someone who's an actively engaged learner, but people whose ideas, whose preconceptions are not like all of us sat here at the moment, and not being, you know, rubbed off and made cynical by years of seeing things that sort of didn't work. So it's painting onto a fairly fresh canvas some new ideas.
I think the student. I think the
I'd like to propose a story to put some boundaries on this, and maybe agree, maybe not, but that's the point. So a student, but let's say, and I can take this from my own life, a student who has an idea about how something should work, or an observation. And in my case, it was, you know, hyperlinks. And it wasn't until a year later or sometime later that I stumbled onto Ted Nelson, right? After a lot of work and just happened to find this. So that period of time where I'm thinking, I'm familiar with the internet and hypertext of a programmer, but there's still this wall, impenetrable wall of all this previous knowledge. And in my case, I happened to stumble onto it, but how much have I not stumbled onto, right? That problem, I think, not only is poorly addressed currently, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And if we could do anything to open that up, to add a little bit of wayfinding to people. And so the student in this case might be someone who is aware of ACM, who has read white papers, but doesn't like to read them because it's a whole lot of time invested in to read something you don't know if it's going to apply to you or not. So it's not that they have their thesis so narrowly figured out, it's still a little open-ended. But if they can see something that has enough potential connection to how they're thinking, they will gladly read this paper, right?
So this is where I press interesting on our fictional recording device, transcription device. So what we're saying then is that we're supporting students, but not students learning an established field only, not like studying medicine or history or whatever. Well, of course, those are not fully established, but you know what I mean.
We're not judging at all, really.
Yeah, but it is about a student who is creatively trying to create, not just understand, create new knowledge.
Whew. Yes.
Sonar pulse.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, it was my wife texting me very interesting stuff about gifts for children.
I think it was texting you, so your mother's trying to ring you.
Right. So, but we are talking about someone who wants to create. It could be someone creating a startup company. It could be someone wanting to do a technology. It could be someone trying to really, okay, so the thing, Edgar, he's 4, he's had his first week of school, actual school. And what I'm trying to explain to him is that learning is something he has to actively engage with. I'm trying to tell him that in different ways. It's not just listening to what the teacher says, writing it down, going home. It is about how does this connect? All of that stuff is what I'm trying to get in his head. So that is also creative. Integrating knowledge is creative as well as trying to do something new, right?
Yeah, and I would even add to that. There's, I think everyone in this room feels this way, that you have this revelation, this eureka moment, and then as you get older, you realize, oh, there are other people who've had these ideas, and they've had the ability to work on them for 20 years. Oh, I can jump ahead if I learn what they learned, right? And you really fall in love with that. That's the area that I would love to explore and make easier for people.
Yeah, this is almost like when Mark references a series of books that maybe we have not seen or read or even found out before. We don't necessarily have the vocabulary to work through a concept that we haven't reached. Might not know the prior art or any of the textual history behind it. So it is almost like a, well, you guys can kind of build on the metaphor from there, but that is the piece that resonates with me, Alan, in terms of the student who does not quite know what else is around this field that they're already exploring. How do you augment that process?
Absolutely.
Like an overview of the subject or the topic.
As it exists, but as part of them creating something new. Yeah. Peter?
Yeah, did anyone ever hear of the Programmer's Apprentice project from the MIT AI Lab?
No,
basically.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, basically it was a program that would sit in the background and watch a programmer who was working and recognize patterns in the code that he was writing, and then suggest possible completions or possible errors if he started deviating from the pattern that it assumed that he was following. I think it'd be really nice if the library could recognize what path I'm on if I'm reading a sequence of sources that other people have followed before, and then tell me, here are the next 4 jumps in the path, and this is a path that's been recognized before. And even, matter of fact, here's the most recent set of books that are based upon this path.
So a recommender system that actually works is, I think, what you're describing.
And just to add on to that, I wasn't going to add this in, but now it's right in line. So quick story, and I apologize for taking up so much time here. When I had my previous job, I was thrown into the middle of creating a machine learning team in the enterprise for this large company. And I only knew of machine learning for what you read in Medium articles, right? And so getting the vocabulary was one part, and that was intense, stochastic and gradient descent and all this. But it didn't really hit until I made the metaphor to something that I knew. And then all of a sudden, these words seemed arbitrary, right? Because I could say that, like, oh, all that is just finding the average in this way, right? And it suddenly made sense to me. It was much more simplistic. So I love the apprentice, the programmer's apprentice, and that would be the kind of like, maybe the scaled goal is to not only say, how do I find the vocabulary, but how do I associate it to something that I understand, right? And take this alien concept, and it's not the application's job necessarily, but if there was something that was metaphor or adjacent or orthogonally aware, to say, you're reading about this, but other people have compared it to a water park, and then it clicks.
Yeah, I mean, now we're getting close to prejudices, my prejudice, and that is, I really reject viscerally the idea of press button, computer gives answer.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
right? I really don't like that. I do accept that it is my prejudice, and it's not just because I'm so clever. It's the opposite. I accept that there will be some good, even machine learning, that will actually be able to plug into this workflow and actually give useful stuff. Absolutely, no question. I just have to throw my hand up in the air and say, it's beyond my IQ to figure out how to integrate that, because it's too close to magic button.
Agreed.
But if we step down a level, maybe, of really specifically saying, like even an author, we have press N and it shows you all the names in the document. Really basic sensor level machine learning, right? And for the bigger stuff that we're talking about here, what are the things that are kind of, in a bad language, but more reasonable to have AI ML do for the user? That would be really interesting, provided it can be interacted with in a powerful way. Sorry, Peter?
Yeah. Also, there was another thread to the machine learning thing, and that was earlier work back in the days of symbolic AI that were based upon scripts and plans. So, for instance, Shank had a restaurant scenario where it described the sequence of events that would normally happen when you go into a restaurant, so that if someone said, I paid the bill, it was then able to draw the inference that you'd previously received food, you'd placed an order, you'd come in the door, and none of that was your computational look for buckets of words and basically count the number of times words appear and hash them into higher order multidimensional space and spit out an answer like today's machine learning does. It was based much more on culling consciously, here are sequences of operations, here are patterns of events, and then here are the phrases that indicate that this pattern's in play. So if you talk about tip, waitress, that would tell the system, it's probably using the restaurant script. And then it'd be able to draw references and inferences from that. But of course, that actually takes some people consciously massaging the knowledge and putting it into a machine readable form. And it's not just something that you can throw 3 terabytes of canned text at and have a system grind away, burning God knows how much carbon in the process to generate an automated model for. But I think there's a lot more that you can do with small groups of people actively working on knowledge modeling consciously, as opposed to just the big word count bit buckets.
Mm-hmm. Comment on that, but I've been talking a lot, so if anyone else, Mark, go ahead.
Just quickly, really actually building on your description and the sort of type of student and learning we're doing, I'm just going to make a plea for pragmatism, in the sense that one of the reasons I keep sort of thinking back at the data level is that we over-validate success at the moment, and sometimes you just got to dive into the thing to see if it works or not. So in terms of exploring the sort of paradigm that Alan laid out, part of the exploration here is, well, can we find, can we actually create those trails, rather than start from the premise of, well, we'll write some code, we'll create a system that does this. Well, I don't know that's necessarily possible. I mean, I'd like to hope it is, but I don't believe it is until I get a bit further into it. So part of the interesting thing of diving into that sort of scenario is saying, okay, so what, it's rummaging out the unknown unknowns in this. Oh, right. So in order to bridge this, we need to probably go to a place we didn't expect. This thing that we thought was just a logical sequence is actually a complex sort of manipulational presentation or something, for sake of argument. So I just made the thing, I'm very happy to try and fail, because I think that's the way we move things forward. It's not that I expect to fail or I want to fail, but I go into it with a sense that, if it's all absolutely drop dead gorgeous and it's the next mother of all demos, I would be wonderfully surprised, but it probably won't be. But that's not bad, and I still think there will be enough people who have thought about these things, will see good in it that makes it worth doing.
I love that, and I'll be real quick, because Adam, I want to hear what you have to say. But this actually links back to you. So definitely agree. In fact, I think that we don't need to have the philosopher's mindset here. We can have the maker mindset and just build things and make mistakes and see what comes out of it and learn that way. Also, Frode, I agree that the whole one button, here's your answer. I hate that. And in fact, what I'd like is an understanding that the effort's going to happen on the part of the student in this case. And we're going to give them some information, but it's understanding that they're going to go look through it. So the quick example that I have is something I've always wanted for my own site or whatever is, if I'm reading something and I want to find out more sort of about it, I don't want to just click on links. If I could do a search that isn't just a search, but it says, right now I'm in a top-down mentality. I'm in a clouds versus a pragmatic maker mentality. right? Or I want something that is very close time bound to when this was written, or I want something that is several steps away, but I know that I could step through other people's ideas and artifacts to get back to what I was reading, right? Like, so almost a radar search, and this applies directly to ACM and a possible interface, a way of synthesizing how this information connects to each other through mental models. You know, if you set up your setting of, I'm a philosopher who's learning to code, you know, show me these things, versus I am, yeah, I'll stop there. Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, somewhat related is that I often come back as a student when I'm in student mode that I really want those smaller curated lists. I've said it many times here before that I want Mark's list in order of what to read about spatial hypertext or interface design and graphical design or some. If I have a new area that I want to explore, I really need that curated list. And at one point it worked searching for it in Google because then I found blogs with people's top list and read this and read that. But nowadays it's so commercialized, so it's basically top 10 designer books, and it's just the books that are in stock at Amazon. So I'm not really sure if it's good or bad. It's really hard to discern. So I need a way to find a specific, good people with good taste. Because you don't want recommendation systems to give you a recommendation based on your profile. You want someone smarter, one step above, not two step above, because then you're really into
the interesting button. The recording.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good perspective, Adam. So I think kind of summarizing a few of these things is what we're also trying to do is augment the teacher and grading this work, right? And that's just another way of saying, make whoever is authoring something, make their work more readable, right? So for instance, one thing that could be quite interesting is, I think I'm combining a few things here. You have a PDF, we're still within that mold, where you issue a command where it opens up every single reference, you know, all the original references. So then you can then maybe put that into the timeline or other stuff, right? So it says, because what is a document? An academic document is exactly what you're saying, Adam. The references there should be what that author thinks is relevant to that field.
Should.
Yeah, no, exactly. But then we get into link types. Some of them are, I think this is nonsense. The system doesn't know that. So if we completely wipe the slate clean and we go into a fresh classroom and we say, you know, why don't you guys experiment? Here is a system we are working on where we're really helping the student formalize their thoughts, which is what writing is, structure their thoughts, but in the way that we've all been discussing, so that it's a teacher doesn't have to read every gosh darn word of every paper, because it takes a lot of time and it's a waste of time. You know, just make it a really rich experience.
Yeah, I really do think there's definite, you know, time has come to put sort of link types back, and not just as I think they were originally, because they were in the time of programmatic AI, and they were done for argumentation in a very deliberate programmatic sense or computational sense. But I think of them coming back in a semantic sense. You're adding a layer of knowledge and interpretation and speak. You know, getting back to Adam's point is, now I want to know something that someone smarter who's in the room thinks about it. And of course, we all think we're terribly smart, so it's rather difficult because you can't just go and ask people because they'll say yes. So you know, some filtering required. But having this extra information is useful, and it can cut both ways, because it can be as a young student, you're marking up your links saying, well, this is what all the old white dudes told me was important, you know, saying that it's not self-evident from looking at this. It's important, but clearly I'm supposed to nod my head to it. Otherwise, I'm going to get dinged.
So in the text here, Raphael said a lot of what we're talking about has to do with how in me we've been organizing information. Exactly. So we're not talking about just building one system, because that's a demo. It would be interesting if we build in such a way that we can export to me, and the context is preserved. So if you want to author in Adam's environment, but you want someone to read it in me or whatever else, that should be possible, right? So we're talking about the connective tissue again. But we still need to try to figure out some kind of a presentation, right? Because that'll help focus our minds. So what we are talking about is helping a student go through literature, find out who is worth listening to, compiling and presenting a worthwhile piece of documentation, let's not call it a document, documentation for a teacher to review and comment on. That basic cycle is so core to all of this, no matter what level of writing you're on, right? But it should be, we're not a commercial company. We don't want to lock this into a single thing. So that's why it's so important to be able to import from multiple sources and export to multiple sources, right?
Amen.
So that goes a little bit to what I was talking with Moriel at the Wikipedia Foundation of how they do their infrastructure. It obviously goes to visual meta too. When things are copied and moved about, it should retain so much of what it is. But I think some of our discussions of what that means is really, really interesting. The discussion I had with my advisor this morning was that even when you do the quick in and out searches, you do actually see the whole page. You do actually get a sense of context, even if you're picking out a morsel. Right? So if we're doing these contexts moving around, what are the contexts we're actually moving? This becomes really, really interesting, because as a teacher, I may very well want to have a trail of that student. That student says, I'm now working on X work. Everything shall be recorded. And the teacher can then look at the paper and say, hang on, you went through this path of these sites? This is rubbish. Let me show you, these are the ones that are relevant, start again. Or vice versa, the teacher saying, I had no idea that this was relevant. This is fantastic. Let's share it with the rest of the group, right?
I have a couple of comments. It has to do with first points of view, which directly connects to what Frode just mentioned. Maybe one person studied one subject, through one point of view, and it works, in that sense. But a lot of other people, connected those points with different methodologies. And the problem I see, not with points of view, I really like seeing different points of view. The problem I see is with how we give relevance to the content. So for example, in academia, if a person is cited, that counts kind of like, a like. So this is a good paper. But then after a little bit, it starts to snowball. So if a paper has 20 citations, then it's going to get even more citations because it has already 20 citations. So how do you give visibility to things that are good but haven't been cited yet because if it's new, or it's because it's obscure, or it's in a different language? Because in social, it's a direct connection to social media, I think, because if you have this incredible video or post and nobody has seen it yet, it might not be because it's a bad content. Maybe it didn't use the correct meta tags, the correct search terms, or the correct words to be able to be findable. So when I think about connecting information, it's really to give people, the visibility that they need based on points of view, without having, the algorithms decide what it shows based on how many times it was cited, or how many likes it has, how many shares it has, how many comments it has. I think all of those things, they are important for, for specific contexts. but I think they can be very harmful when you're trying to see different points of view or information that hasn't been found or cited yet.
That is the problem. I'll put my hand down.
Yeah, it's definitely the case. I definitely found myself getting very cynical about citation counts. It's not that anyone's particularly deliberately trying to game them, but there is this thing of once you get past a threshold level, some sort of, oh, I better cite that because somebody else did, and then it's at so many arms reach away from you that all you see is just the number going up. So if you know no better, what you don't know, you have no idea why it was originally cited in the first place, unless it's something that's, that it has a very singular idea, which is sort of well referenced. But often you just see, oh, this paper in this area seems to got an awful lot of citations, but what's it doing? Funnily enough, sometimes they're useful because what they turn out to be is they're a meta index. Where when you tease it apart, the main thing somebody's done is found all the interesting bits and put them in one place for you. And that's wonderful.
And there's a complement to this train of thought, is that if you take a citation from a long time ago, and over time people keep citing it, and then eventually you cite the newer person and the newer person and the newer person, the further away you are from the source, from the base material, the more Frankenstein that idea becomes. So provenance is a very important word. Like, it's good to have derivations of these ideas to explore different perspectives of it. But I think the source or the foundation or the provenance should always be connected with it. But it's always also hard to get provenance depending on the content. But
there's a really that throws up a really interesting thought, which is, so in a sense, you want to interact with the current learning or the current thought on this thing.
Yes.
But what you really want is for the thing that you interact with to be like a bit like a Russian doll. Nested inside it is the original thing, which you don't really need, because the provenance is you're citing this thing because of what's below, but you don't need to drill all the way down there and give another drive-by citation to the thing at the end. Not because it doesn't deserve it, but because the extra citation actually hinders rather than helps our use of citational work.
It really probably depends on why you're citing and what you're doing. If you're trying to invent something rather than get to the origins for historical purposes, Alan.
Yeah. So this may be antithetical, so feel free to throw away the idea. But hearing some of this, I was thinking, in the same way that like PowerPoints and presentations are a view, an opinionated view of said topic. White papers, articles, PDFs are the same. It would be interesting maybe to be able to tweak the settings of a paper that you're reading. And it's antithetical because it goes, we have the idea of the author and this is what they put together. But if we threw that away for a moment and said, okay, they have all these links. I want to read a different version of this paper that either truncates parts so I don't have to worry about it, or embeds the provenance more into the core document rather than being in the footnotes or references to. If we thought of a PDF or white paper as being multiple views, multiple presentation layers that you could tweak and work and just explore that way. I don't know that it's even possible because the author would probably pitch a fit, but I think it'd be really fun to read papers that way.
I mean, I think that would also argue us to tweak the way we write slightly, because I don't know about others, but the number of times I've gone to a paper that said, something, see blogs, you go there and you read through 12 pages of something and you are absolutely none the wiser.
Yes.
And it sort of it's close. The point is, it's not a bogus citation, but it's just absolutely not clear how the paper really describes. So that may be inexperience, idleness on the part of the person, but I think it's also teaching us a lesson in that one of the things that maybe we want to encourage in the tools you make is for people to actually foreground slightly more what they're saying. So rather than make an observation and just bam, stick us on paper by it and say job done, move on to the next sentence. Because without that bit of reasoning, the really interesting idea you just mentioned becomes harder.
Yeah. And in many ways, the abstract in papers is a way to address this. Is an early attempt. Here's a different view of the same paper in a paragraph or two. Proceed at your own caution.
Well, some things do auto abstracts, don't they? And it'd be interesting, in a sense, to see how many things where the author's abstract is anything like other authors writing of it.
I have to go. Sorry, I just got a message. Edgar's tired. First week of school. I have to cook dinner. But when it comes to a lot of this, even though, Mark, you are very much, we shouldn't just pile stuff in. It becomes kind of pile stuff in to analyze all the different authors and all of this stuff. Can someone please make sure Mark isn't listening for a second? I don't actually use a citation manager for my own PhD, believe it or not, because I hate them, right? And I don't actually believe that I have to have a pristine library of anything. And I'm not saying I'm a good student. This is not me bragging. This is just the state of one person's affairs, right? If I make an assertion, I then find backup for it, and I will look for ACM or wherever I think there is a backup for that assertion, and I may be wrong, right? So the point I'm trying to say is, even though visual meta, blah, 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 citations, I don't really care about citations. I'm here to try to invent something new. I'm an artistic background kind of person. So if I read something that I'm not sure about, I can click on a citation if it's presented well to see the backup. But also, it's instant to search to see if something is nonsense or not, right? So are we really talking about building more trees of he said, she said? Or are we really trying to dig down into how we can explicitly say, I believe these things fit with this in this way? Are we building knowledge, or are we building histories of what was thought before? I think they're quite different things. I'm not.
That's where semantics on the links would matter. If you're going to link to it, explain at least to yourself why you're doing it. And I think we're talking about, this is the process we have when we're writing. We just don't externalize it. Therefore, we rob ourselves of future use of that important thought in the moment as to why you're doing something. And I don't think the approach you described is in any way antithetical to reference managers, because they fill a different gap. You're doing if you're writing one thesis and you do all the management of something in one thesis, what point a reference manager? If you're cranking out 40 papers a year, managing all the papers in every document would argue that maybe you want an optimization process, and indeed that's why you're talking about data management. So I think the reference manager thing's a bit of a blind, but what I think we're not taught to do and don't force ourselves to do is to capture intent. We rather tend to assume it, which leads others and indeed ourselves to learn to not explain. Just say, well, go and read this 400-page book. I don't want to read the 400-page book. I mean, I actually want to know about the one thing, because if you've read it and the only thing you got out of that 400-page book was one thing, I want to know what that is, because I don't want to waste my time reading it.
Did you read the International Herald Tribune, Mark?
Well, I know of it.
The International Herald Tribune, it's now entirely owned by the New York Times, which is a horrible big mistake, was amazing. It cost much more than a normal newspaper, and it was a tenth the size. You pay for the editing, which goes to so much of what we've said, people have said here. We don't have time to read masses of stuff. We want to know people who are well informed. Like, I read or listen to The Economist because I trust their editorial.
FT is very good as well.
Yeah. So, we already have some things in our normal lives where we choose a DJ of knowledge. So what you guys are talking about to find that within, you know, in kind of the academic thing is good. You know, how, anyway.
I think I'm stealing
Armin
that.
van Buren
My
was
elevator pitch is I'm a knowledge DJ.
Yeah, well, you are.
the Skrillex of Wikipedia.
This goes back to, I mean, it's funny, it goes right back to Plato and Socrates, or Socrates specifically, is that like, I mean, the way we would write papers now is institutionalized, and it's a product of affordances that we have far newer affordances now. But back then, you know, you could have a conversation, and if I didn't understand a particular term, then the mentor or teacher I'm talking to could then truncate, change directions, you know, look at a different set of constellations and say, let's explain how these connect first before I proceed and talk about this.
Yes, but huge bubble butt on this one, right?
Bubble butt.
Bubble butt. Huge.
That sounds very odd.
Like you, well, Noah Harari said, you know, writing was invented to solve different problems than text. So in a conversation, I know this is obvious, but I think it's important to highlight. If you have this guru, teacher person, you have a conversation, of course it's wonderful, but it has many issues. Number one, time. Not every single student can spend hours with the teacher. Number two, if the student asks questions, it can take the teacher off track, right? It can go down to something different that the teacher was trying to communicate. Also, it is entirely flowing this way. You can't freeze it in your mind and compare and contrast. So there is a lot of that. There's a lot we need to get out of it. And I think what we can do in this community with the medium is allow the fixity of text for thought, but then explode it back out to exactly what you're saying, Alan, right? But we have to really push ourselves to think about what that is, because Socrates, if he was here today and joined us in this conversation, would probably think him a really poor thinker, obviously one of the greatest genius of all time, but he hasn't immersed himself in this stage of our evolution. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So big bubble butt. This goes back to even what Mark was saying about it. I actually think that the key to this riddle is in how we write. So how many times have you worked on a draft of something? Yeah. Have you worked on a draft of something and said, okay, you know what? I don't need to say that part, or you know what? I need to explain this even more. And then you wind up with this canonical final version, because we don't have a tool right now that says all of your previous drafts still fit into this final product. That doesn't have to be the thing that, you know, a person has to read every part, but they can explore the spokes of this hub. They can explore this sort of rhizome of all the different things that you wrote and tried out. Like that I wish we had that, because that would make a lot of what we're talking about with the PDFs far easier. Yeah,
I mean, what I've argued with Mark about a year ago about what an endnote versus a footnote is and all of that stuff, right? We need more of that kind of stuff. So in author right now, when you export, a citation is in one style, an endnote is, you know, a superscript letter. There are different things. It would be amazing if we can develop something that can capture what you're talking about. Like in Final Cut, you can have auditions. You have this bit of video, but you have many versions of it. You can cycle through, you play the whole thing, and it inserts things. Yes, it should be easy to have something like an endnote that is actually, here's things I tried earlier, right? So it's not just blank text. These are really interesting avenues, yes, for sure. Because at the end of the day, you will need something linear to make an argument. Otherwise, you don't have an argument, right? But how can we keep the richness? That's what we're talking about, right, guys? I have to go feed my son. Will you guys stay on? Should I leave it on for a bit?
I'm gonna go cook as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got
I have to provide some transport for my mom, so
Yep.
I should be heading out too.
Right then. It's a pleasure.
I look forward
Bye-bye,
to Monday. Have a brief weekend, everyone.
Yep, have a good weekend.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Thanks.
Bye.